He's in the Lake. Written and narrated by Steve Gray. The rippling of tiny waves met the bank of the lake. It was late in the afternoon, and threatening-looking clouds began to form overhead. As the minutes passed by, a very slight chop began to break the surface of the lake as a light but steady breeze began to blow. The reddish-orange sun was sinking behind pine trees on the west bank. It had been a long, hot summer day, but a quiet day. Quiet in contrast to how this place used to be in the early days. The days before the dark time, when the owners of this campground filed for bankruptcy, closed it up, and moved out of state. Bankruptcy. Seems as legitimate a reason as any to downplay the real reason this place became deserted. The empty cabins that remain are silent and vigilant, standing against the elements and seasons since the previous decades of their construction. Canoes that haven't been on the water in years are still stacked on racks and are covered with putrescent sheaths of mildew. The gentle breeze that began to blow on that sweltering summer day grew more aggressive and intrusive. It rattled the leaves in the surrounding trees. The billowing clouds were descending to darkness. They enveloped the area in a foreboding shroud. A bustling sound was emitting from one of the empty cabins as employee of the State Fish and Game Commission, Kelly, finished up a few maintenance tasks inside. She had a schedule which required her to maintain the property once a month, as it was now owned by the state. Kelly, along with her co-worker, Samantha, finished up their duties for the day and met back at the truck around 4:45. "Weather's not looking so good," Samantha said. "Yeah, the wind's kicked up pretty heavily, though. Might just blow right over us," Kelly said. "Were you able to get that supply line replaced on the toilet in cabin 2? Asked Kelly. "Yeah, I did. God, these places are so fucked up and creepy. I gotta be honest with you, I didn't like working alone in them," Samantha said as she brushed the hair from her face. The wind was blowing it in crazy directions. "Yeah, Cabin 7 has been standing wide open for a while," Kelly said. "The door was fully open and there were leaves and dirt on the floor. That's how I could tell. But it was shut and locked when we were last here. So it must have been a bum or someone broke in." Samantha was slowly looking around the area nervously as she braced her winces against the steady winds. "This place gives me the creeps, but then the woods always have," she said. "Ever since I saw that movie about the kids who get lost in the woods and get killed by a witch." "Ah, yeah, Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, that movie always shook me up too," Kelly laughed as she lit up a smoke. It was an effort to do so in the onslaught of the wind. "Say, let's walk down to the boat deck and sit down for a few. I'm not quite ready to head back to the office," Kelly said as she motioned toward the lake. Samantha had a quick, reluctant look, but agreed, and the two began to walk down the trail toward the boat deck. The sunken sun was totally engulfed by clouds, and the area was getting darker. Samantha said, "You know, it's getting late and dark. I don't mind relaxing for a few minutes, but can we think about heading back soon?" "Aw, come on," Kelly said. "What are you afraid of?" Samantha shrugged and looked around slowly. "Wouldn't be him, would it?" Kelly asked. Samantha quickly darted a glance back at Kelly, eyes slightly wide. "Him?" she asked. "Yeah, you know, him." "Who's him?" Samantha asked. "Him. The reason this camp closed," Kelly replied. Samantha paused for a couple seconds, once again pulling her hair from her face. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Kelly's expression morphed from one of being inquisitive to almost sinister knowing. "Ah, well, see, on the record, this place was closed because the owners had lost money and were left without a choice but to close the place and file for bankruptcy." Her glance then panned out across the choppy waters of the lake. "They certainly lost money, but that's not all they lost, and it was all because of him," she said. "Well, who's him?" Samantha asked, with a quiver in her voice. Kelly kept her gaze fixed upon the water as she continued to explain. "Well, let's just say that he is the reason so much was lost, and why no one comes here. He was a maniac, A psychopath who murdered anyone and everyone who ever did come here. I can't remember his name, oddly enough, but that's not important. She reached into her cargo shorts leg pocket to retrieve another smoke. She put one in her mouth, guarded the flame against the wind, and lit the cigarette. Her features actually looked a little more weathered in the orange glow of the flame. She said, "Yeah, he was responsible for over 100 deaths." 100 deaths? Samantha gasped. Both women were staring at the choppy waters, although Samantha was only looking because Kelly was. They shut this place down, opened it back up again, shut it down, opened it up. Every time he'd come back and kill. It took over 100 people dying violently by his hand before they finally locked it down for good. "Oh, you're making this up," Samantha said. Kelly looked from the water to Samantha to see the almost pleading look on her face. "I wish I was, honey, but it's true." Samantha remembered the wide-open door at Cabin 7, and a chill ran up her spine. There was a long pause as both women stood there, wind blowing. "Did they catch him? Where is he? What happened?" Samantha was asking, and her rapid-fire questioning made Kelly chuckle briefly. "Well, where is he, you ask?" She glanced back out across the water. "He's in there," she said. Samantha shot a wide-eyed glance back out at the lake. "What?" she barked. "Yeah, well, that's the rumor anyway. That a brother of one of his victims managed to kill him and dump his body somewhere out there. The story has had a lot of versions that have picked up and have subtracted details through the years. But yeah, overall, that's the gist of it." Samantha couldn't believe it. She was sure that this was just Kelly trying to scare her. It sounded too cliché. "You mean you've never wondered why this prime piece of real estate sits empty?" Kelly asked. "Well, no. But now you've got me thinking," Samantha replied. Samantha was relatively new to the job and hadn't had much time on duty to gather up small details like the one Kelly was bringing up. "Every month I come out here to service this place," Kelly started, "and every month I notice something different or tampered with. Now this place is out here a pretty good ways, as you've seen, so whoever it is that's doing things is either traveling a long way to get out here, or..." She paused, looked back out across the water. "Or what?" Samantha asked. "It's him." Her face continued to face the water, but her eyes slowly rolled to look at Samantha. "Oh, stop!" Samantha shouted. Kelly started to giggle and turned to face the path toward the cabins. She started walking. "Come on, let's go. I have some work orders to sign off on before we call it a day. Want to grab a beer on the way back?" She was about a quarter of the way on the path and continued walking. She said, "If you want, we can stop by that little dive right off of Patburr Drive. We don't have to..." She turned to see that Samantha wasn't next to her. She looked back at the dock. "Samantha? What the f..." She jogged back down to the dock and looked around frantically for Samantha. She didn't see her. What she saw was a mass of suds, bubbles, and turbulence in the water right at the base of the dock. But she hadn't heard a splash. What the hell happened? "Samantha!" she called. Nothing. "Samantha!" The only sound aside from the wind raging through the trees and the drops of rain that were now falling on the dock was the sizzling sound coming from the foam and commotion in the water, which was now tapering off. She stood for a minute staring at the water, confused. Samantha wasn't coming up. Could she swim? Oh no! She's drowning! She fell in! She took a deep breath and quickly jumped in the water. She swam deep down in a panic, looking for Samantha. She couldn't see her. Aw, shit! What to do? What to do? She was needing to surface for air soon. She could feel her heart hammering away in her chest, and the pain in her lungs was like fire. It ripped through her torso as she rocketed toward the surface. She only dimly saw the slight illumination of the last of the daylight through the surface of the water. She was inches from the surface when she felt the forceful grip of a hand grabbing her ankle. She could see the dock through the water shrink in size as she was violently jerked deep down. She could see the bubbles in the millions and the foam, and then she understood. Seconds after, air was forced from her mouth as a searing pain shot through her back. The foam and suds turned scarlet in color as her flailing, first frantic, now turned slow and lethargic. The rain above the surface was increasingly heavy, as was the wind. The choppy waters remained so. The bubbles and suds were diminishing, and aside from the State Fish and Game Commission vehicle parked at the mouth of the property, the place was deserted and quiet again. And stays that way now. Or does it?